Okay, I think this is year 5 with my giant redwood, or a giant sequoia. Got pretty cold this winter. It's March 11th, March 11th, 2025 right now. Did have a pretty cold winter where we had quite a few days in single digits for a low temperature, but I think it kind of looks like it did last spring, which is totally fine. It's just a kind of a pale color, pale green, very slightly green, not much at all, and just a little bit brown in places, but again, it's pretty normal compared to what it did the last few years. So, good. The trunk looks really nice, and again, the farther down you go, the more mature it looks. This is still a little fresh here. And then even more so up top. Get focus right up in here. So again, it's probably a little over 5 feet tall, and this is, again, I think going into the 5th year. I think I planted this I planted it like sometime in January a few years ago, but I think this is actually going into the 5th year. So if I back up a little bit, I did put a fence around it to keep the deer from rubbing on it. Obviously they can just walk right up here if they wanted to and just come right over the fence and chew on the ends of the branches, but either they don't like it or just didn't decide to chew on it. But maybe they don't like it, because we did have snow for a few weeks on the ground, and I would have thought if they were really hungry and they liked this, they would be chewing on it, but they didn't. But mostly put the fence around to keep the male deer from rubbing the antlers on it in autumn, because trying to get that felt off their antlers. So anyway, it still looks really good and healthy right now. Let me see if I can zoom in. We'll just be quiet for a minute and look at a few spots here on the tree, and then maybe we'll go over and look at my my heated Bluebird house. Where, get my finger in the picture right over here. I'll show you that contraption. I've just got it on the closest focus, so it's without getting the lens. There we go. Now, once we get a little bit farther in spring and it actually starts growing, this will, the tips especially, it'll start getting sort of a light green color. It never really gets well, it does get a little bit dark green, but when it's growing, the new growth is sort of a light green. But yeah, it still feels good to me. Nothing's crunchy. Everything still feels nice and alive here. It's normal to get some dead spots, back further, closer to the trunk a little bit, but out here on the ends, everything's looking really good. So again, this is it's like going into year 5. So far, so good with the health of the tree. This is pretty thick clay, so it holds water really well, and I think these would rather be drier in really good, well-draining soil. So it's probably not the ideal conditions for it, and if I thought about it more, I should have kind of replaced the soil here with something more well-draining, at least 3-4 feet around, and mound it up a little bit. But keep it well watered also when it gets dry. It might have helped it get more established, but so far it's looking really good. It's on a slope too, so it does drain. So let's go look at this Bluebird house, Nestbox. The reason I did this is because I think I explained this one year. Bluebirds started nesting a little early, and I think it was sometime in late March they had babies, and it was just too cold and the babies died, and it just it made me feel bad because I kept seeing the parents come with food going in and out of the box, and of course nobody's eating it because they're dead. So what I have here, I just coiled it up for now until we see that they're nesting. It's got just a normal plug on the end, 110 volts here in the US. So I'll put an extension cord over to the house eventually over there, and I'll put one of those protectors on here so it's not out in the open in the weather. I use this to feed the bluebirds. People say, well, don't put something there next to the bluebird, the box, and you only have predators and other bluebirds, not bluebirds coming in like blue jays and everybody else, but they don't bother. I watch when they're around, and I make sure the bluebirds eat it. So that's what that's there for. So what I did was, this is just like a reptile. It's a flat, you can't really see it here, I've got it all covered up, but it's a flat heater. If somebody's really super interested in it, I can look up the one I bought, but it doesn't get super hot, but it's flat up against the wood of the Bluebird Nestbox. So it's flat up against the wood. Then I have some insulation, just regular insulation you'd have in a house, and then I put some plastic on the outside of that, so obviously the insulation doesn't get wet from the rain, and I kind of sealed it up here. And this doesn't look very good, but bluebirds don't care, right? They're just raising their babies. It is still vented up here under this eave and over here on this one, so you don't want to totally enclose it and get them too hot, even in spring, because it does get up in the 70s sometimes, and then it goes down colder and 40s and sometimes 30s at night, and unfortunately sometimes at 20s. That's why the babies died that one year. So it's just all wrapped around, and the front here, I just kind of brought it down and put some caulk there to keep any water from going down inside, and just kind of neaten it up a little bit. I've got a little perch out here for it, and some people also say don't put a perch on there. They're cavity dwellers. They'll just go in hang on the hole and go in like they would out in nature. But my bluebirds like it. They come out here and sit on this all the time. I'll see mom and dad out here sitting on it. They'll come out here and perch, and they'll look up at the hole, look around, and look up at the hole, and then they'll go in. Now, if this isn't here, then they're sitting on top of it. But it's just a stick from the yard, and I just attached it to the post here, and they like that. And this is to keep the critters from being able to climb up, raccoons or whatever, so they can't climb up and stick their paw down into the box and grab a baby. So that's it. This works really good. I checked. What I do is I have a thermometer, on the end of my multimeter, and I'll stick that in the hole, down inside the Bluebird box, and make sure it's not getting too hot. On nice days when it's like in the 60s or whatever, I just unplug it so it's not really heating. And the insulation on there, might think this is black and that'll absorb heat. It does, but there's insulation under there. There's like 3 inches or so of insulation, and that kind of keeps the temperature well regulated in there. So it doesn't take a whole lot of heat, from this little reptile heater. This normally would go in like if you have a gecko or something, go in like the bottom of the like aquarium, like glass cage or whatever you'd have for a gecko. That's really all it is, and then just covered up so it doesn't get damaged by the rain. And again, insulation. So this goes, again, the heater against the wood of the box, directly against the wood, so the heat kind of radiates in there, and then the insulation on top of that, and then the piece of plastic on top of that, and then sealed up really well so the rain doesn't go down in there and soak the insulation. So that is it. And they did really well last year with that. After I put that on there, they've got the best house in the neighborhood as far as comfort. And again, they get some wax worms, I think that's what it is. They're kind of cheaper than, no, not wax worms. Yeah, well, wax worms, I try to get wax worms when the babies are first hatched, for a couple weeks. So I'll put some wax worms there. They're kind of like those white grub looking things. Put them in there, and in that little tray, and the parents will come down and they'll grab a couple in their mouth, take them in and feed the babies. It works out really well. And I'll put some, later on when they get a little bit older, just some regular mealworms, live mealworms, and the parents eat some of those, and then of course they take a lot of them to the babies, and I sprinkle a little bit of that calcium powder on them too, because I read that if you're just feeding them a lot of mealworms, it's not good for their bones, so it kind of takes away some calcium, I guess, from their bones, and especially not good if the mother, the female bluebird is trying to lay eggs. I've heard that if they have a really bad calcium problem, the eggs are kind of gooey and they'll just get stuck in them when they're trying to lay the eggs, and it can kill them. So anyway, that's my bluebird story. So bluebird box, heated, and my Dawn redwood tree. Not Dawn redwood, I've got a Dawn redwood right there. That's a Dawn redwood. Kind of looks like a bald cypress tree, really. But this is the giant redwood or giant sequoia. Alright, so that was for anybody interested in the giant redwood and also the heated bluebird box.